Hello. In this lesson, we're going to cover indexing, which is sort of taking it a step further from the basic configuration that we did in the last video. So if a company or a customer is using Drivve for more specific retrieval of the documents, more than just the mighty search or the hierarchy or the document type, we can use what's called the management console to create specific index fields. So if you remember, I showed you the Drivve administration folder that's created on the desktop, and one of those tools is called the management console. And in order to run the management console, we just need to kick it off and log in as a user that has administrative access. In this case, we can just use public and public. And you see that here I've got the URL as by default the local host, and it's on the XML port. If you had a Drivve cloud system, you could select that certificate there and point to the P12 file that you can get from my drive and configure in the same way a cloud site. But in this case, we'll stick with local. So first I log in, and the main three tabs are right up here. And you see one is for documents. So this is where we create and configure the indexing for the documents in the system. The second is for the spaces, which is where we can create unique space fields and things like that. And the third is for the workflows, which is where we configure the UI for the workflows. We'll stick with the documents here. You see within documents there's a couple different sections. There's the general, and this is where we can create index fields. There's the order, and this is where we can configure in which order these index fields show up. So for create, that's where you're uploading a file in the browser. Search is where I'm going to find a document, what order do they show up in. And index is in the basic filing cabinet on the right, the index fields, what order do they show up in there. So I could change this around if I wanted. I also have the columns, and what that is the columns when I find a document in a list, the horizontal columns. So document name, document date, type, size, and the type of file, and we can widen those and add new ones there. And then last but not least, we have the indexing sets. And the indexing set is sort of like a table in a relational system. It's a set of index fields that a document can relate to. So for instance, we can create an accounting set where we show the PO number and amount and invoice number and things like that. So over here in general, there's a couple basic ones that are built in. And you see reference number is one that's built in, and it's not shown in the UI, but you can easily just click those boxes and then it'll be shown. But let's add a unique one. So I'll hit the add field button down there, and here it gives me a list of all the fields that exist in the database. But I could add a new database field if I want, and let's call this one invoice num for invoice number. And here I can select the type. And the type here can either be a Boolean, so a checkbox. It can be a byte size, currency, date, which is an interactive date time field. It can be an enumeration, which is a drop down. We can force it to be numeric. And we can also, let's see, I guess string is probably the most common one, which is what we're going to use here. So I created a field in the database called invoice number. I'm going to hit OK. Here you see that it shows up in the left. And what I'm going to want to do is say yes, that value is available when you're uploading a document. Yes, it's allowed when you're searching a document. And no, I do not want to allow multiple searches for invoice number at the same time. And I'm going to say no, it does not show up in the standard indexing field because I'm going to create an indexing set. I can also change the display here, so invoice number, and I'm going to hit save. So now when I go to log in, you'll see that when I go to add a document, I have invoice number as an available field, and when I go to find a document, you see the document type moved up to the second in the row because I changed the order there. And you see also I have the invoice field here. Invoice number starts with, contains, ends, and is. and I can search by the index number now, or the invoice number now. So if I find a document, I can associate an index to it, or sorry, an invoice number to it, and I can find it by the invoice number. But if I find the document here and I open up the file room, you'll see that I still have the basic indexes here for the generic file room. But what I want to do is I want to create a specific one that only relates to documents that are, for instance, accounting or accounts payable. So what I'm going to do is go into the management console again, and I'm going to go into indexing sets, and I'm going to create a new indexing set. And what I want here is for whenever a document is an invoice, I want certain indexing fields to be in the indexing set there. So let's see, what do I want to call this one the invoice, and I can base it off any of these things. I want to base it off the document type, so it's an invoice. Okay. So now when a document is an invoice, what do I want to say about that document? Maybe I want to say the creation date, I want to say the invoice number, maybe the document name, and that should be enough actually. So I'm going to hit File, Save, and I'm going to log out. Sometimes in order for these changes to take place, you need to refresh the site. Sometimes you need to also refresh the XML server if it's taking a while. But if I find that document now, and because it was an invoice, you see now it's changed the available index fields for me. So this is a way of kind of stripping down what we're saying about that document to show only relevant information. So if the document is brought into the system already as an invoice, then I only want certain fields here to be filled out, and I could add PO number, amount, things like that. So an indexing field is a way for you to create unique groups of index fields for documents that are relevant to each other. So accounting, human resources, we should show only what's relevant to that document or to that document type. So also we could change the columns, but I think those are okay in this case. The columns, like I said, are these things right here. So creation date, date, type, size. Remember, those are global functions, so if you change it, it'll show up anywhere that you find a document in the system. And we'll save the spaces section for when we go through spaces.